Order, order. Paul Blomfield to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. I beg to move that this House has considered science and research in the UK and regional economies. And I'm delighted to do so with you in the chair. And I take the opportunity of welcoming the new Minister to his job and looking forward to many engagements with him on issues related to higher education. I move this motion as somebody representing a city whose wealth was built on innovation, from Benjamin Huntsman's invention of crucible steel production in the 1740s to Harry Brearley's invention of stainless steel in 1912, and today the work of the University of Sheffield's Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. Science, research and innovation have driven our city's economy, just as it has for the country as a whole. And that's the challenge that we face, because a generation ago, the UK was one of the most research-intensive economies in the world. Now, Mr. Owen, we are one of the least. We've slipped from leading the OECD countries in terms of R&D spend as a percentage of GDP in 1979 to now trailing behind all our competitors. The US invests 2.8% of GDP in research. OECD countries, on average, like the European Union averages, 2.4%. The UK now trails at 1.7%, less than half the 3.9% invested by South Korea, which, as a result, remains a major manufacturing nation. So where has the research and innovation been lost? And most strikingly, within the private sector, the old world of R&D was dominated by the big companies, the likes of GEC and ICI, and their loss took out big chunks of our innovative capacity. The obsession with short-term returns for shareholders that distorts our equity markets has changed the attitudes of investors. The dynamic of long-term investment for long-term reward that drove the Industrial Revolution and built our economic strength has gone. Today, there are just 2 UK companies that feature among the top 100 around the world for R&D investment. Now, for some time, the impact of the decline in private sector investment in R&D was masked by the continued public sector investment of successive governments. But that changed under the coalition, and then it changed despite the best efforts of David Willetts, who occupied the minister's job for most of that period and who was a real champion of science and of universities. But as the Campaign for Science and Engineering highlighted in their Science is Vital campaign last year, publicly funded research slipped to less than 0.5% of GDP in 2012.
Honourable friend, give way.
I will indeed.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I warmly congratulate him on this very important debate. Would you not agree with me that this is all the more perverse, given that for the research investment which is made significantly through universities, we actually get more bangs for our buck than other countries do in terms of citations and innovation, and therefore if we put in more bucks, we'd get more bangs?
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend for that intervention, and he makes a point which I'll come back to reflect on in a few moments. The drop of our publicly funded research to 0.5% of GDP is the lowest point for over 20 years. The latest figures published by UNESCO in March of this year put UK publicly funded research at 0.48%, well below the EU average of 0.67%, the OECD average of 0.71%, and the G8 average of 0.77%. I will indeed.
In obtaining this debate, and an important debate. He has dwelt a lot on the percentages and where the UK stands on the league table. But is it solely down to investment and finance? What does the member put it down to? What is the difficulty? He mentioned 2 companies that rank now in the world within the United Kingdom. What is the fundamental problem?
Well, I think that the fundamental problem in relation to private sector investment in R&D is the kind of dominant culture of short-termism in terms of investment. That people are looking for quick gains, and actually what we need to rebalance our economy is that long-term investment that drove economic growth in this country in the first place. Now, echoing a point made by my honourable friend, according to the report on the economic significance of the UK science-based produced by the Campaign for Science and Engineering last year, private sector R&D output rises by 20 pence per year in perpetuity for every pound spent by the government on R&D. So there is a real return on public sector investment to stimulate the private sector investment that the honourable member highlights. And it does so by raising the UK's knowledge base. And so that's the real challenge. And there are real opportunities because as a country, we have enormous strengths. Above all, our universities, which are highly productive. Despite, and it's again echoing a point my honourable friend made, despite representing only 4.1% of the global research community, UK research produces 15.9% of the world's most highly cited papers in the last year, for which I have figures available, which is for 2011. So this puts us number one in the world. And crucially, and it's a point I make as a Northern MP, at a time when we share a concern about the regional imbalance of economic growth, universities are one of the few assets that we have spread evenly across the country, able to generate economic growth in all regions and all nations of the UK. Now, universities clearly draw their investment from wide sources and not just public funds, and they've grown their own investment in R&D by 40% in the last decade, and now generate over £3.4 billion per year. But public investment levers in other funding, and academics in research of Research Council grants are shown to be more outward-facing and more engaged in the commercial application of their research. And that's the strength of that research in our universities attracts foreign investment into the UK, and it attracts international students. According to the British Council survey, of 5,000 18 to 34-year-olds in China, India, Brazil, Germany and the US. The fact that the UK has world-leading academic research was the primary attraction for them to come and study in our universities. And those international students clearly bring in over £10 billion of economic benefit to the UK and to our regional economies. In Sheffield alone, I know that the net value of our approaching 9,000 international students is £120 million a year. There are thousands of jobs, and not just in the university sector, dependent on that. I will indeed.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who's making a profound point about the impacts that our first-class universities have on regional economic development. But is he as concerned as I am that within the Golden Triangle of Cambridge, Oxford and London, over 90% of non-university research takes place within that Golden Triangle. And that means that outside the universities, the regions are starved of scientific investment.
I am indeed, and my honourable friend, as a fellow Northern MP, although on the wrong side of the Pennines, makes an important point.
University on the other side.
He did indeed. He's proud to be a graduate of the University of Sheffield, I know. But he makes an important point, and we need to be careful with the very positive developments of the Crick Centre in London, for example, that public investment in research doesn't get sucked into that golden triangle that he refers to at the expense of universities around the country, because the great strength, as I said a moment ago, of our university network is its dispersal around the country, and we need to ensure that funding for research is spread across the sector and across the country. I will indeed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. York has two excellent universities. The University of York being ranked within the 10 top universities for research, 5 departments being in the excellent category. They're right at the top of their league, and yet we're not seeing the relationships built between jobs and growth in our city and with the academic achievements we're getting through our research development. Should not the two come together to see economic growth across our city?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I was a student in York and well aware of the strength of the two universities. And she's right that there's a critical issue in terms of linking research with its commercial application, and I think some progress has been made with the impact approach taken within the sector on this, although there is more to be done, and it was an issue that we looked at in the Biz Select Committee during the last Parliament. But I think although there is more to be done, we should recognise that a huge amount is already being done to link in research, and it's a point that I'll come on to in a moment, using some examples from Sheffield. Now, we would clearly be foolish to lose our advantage in world-leading research, but it is something that could happen if we don't take care. The Plan for Growth, published by the Chancellor and the Minister's predecessor in December 2014, acknowledged the challenge. It said, and I quote, "If we fail to move quickly to secure our position in a globalised world, then it is highly likely that other countries will do so ahead of us. We not only risk missing out on new opportunities, but also losing the position of strength that we have today." So the government acknowledge that we can do more and must do more. Innovation policy now needs to focus on developing industrial and private sector research and development capacity, building on the UK's strong and well-connected science base. And it'll do this by working with universities. So, for example, the University of Sheffield, and it takes up the point that my honourable friend was making a moment ago, the University of Sheffield works closely with Rolls-Royce, Boeing, and over 100 supply chain companies. Also in my constituency, Sheffield Hallam University secured Toshiba as the first technology partner in the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre, designing new products to help promote the integration of exercise into people's daily lives, addressing common health issues. Hallam's new National Centre of Excellence for Food Engineering has the support of over 40 companies, including Mars and Nestlé, to support growth in the food industry through improved manufacturing technology and staff capability. Across my city and across the whole university sector, science and research is creating jobs. But we could do... I will indeed.
I thank my honourable friend for allowing me to intervene. You talk about research in universities, but actually I think it starts earlier than that. And in my constituency, I have an excellent FE college where I was privileged to visit on Saturday and see the excellent animal studies section facility at Hotwood Hall College. There are small amounts of research being done there, which helps students on the path towards university, but FE colleges are having their funding cut. And I wonder what impact that is having on fledgling research with a view to going to university. Thank you.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and she makes an important point that to acknowledge the research that's taking place outside of the university sector as well. But also, I was making the point earlier that foreign investment is significantly driven by a sense of countries who have a strong research capacity and a strong research strength. Equally, it's driven by countries which commit to skills and skills development. And I think the cuts that she's referring to in the adult skills budget, particularly in relation to further education, are going to weaken our capacity and weaken our potential for economic growth. So she makes an important point. As I say, we could do much more than the examples that I've given. We could build partnerships in developing the infrastructure for low-carbon energy, which we could then export to the world. But if we shrink away from this sort of challenge, China will pay for the new generation of power stations to be built, and we'll miss out on the opportunity to shape our own future. We'll have little leverage in insisting that some of the investment is spent creating jobs in the UK, and we'll pay for it through increased electricity bills for decades. So where should we go? And I've three suggestions, Mr. Owen. Firstly, let's stop making things worse. We should recognise the damage that's been done to the UK by the structural shortcomings of our economy. Research and development is a national asset, and that means we must not incentivise companies to do less of it or make it harder for our universities to transform our economy. Certainly, we mustn't threaten the hugely important stream of research funding that comes through our membership of the European Union. Because as I'm sure the Minister will know and I'm sure endorse, the UK does disproportionately well from European Union research funding. So in 2013, the last year for which data is available, we won 1.11 billion out of the 9.6 billion allocated under the Framework 7 programme, FP7 programme, which was the predecessor of Horizon 2020. And that will clearly be at risk, at enormous cost to our universities and the communities in which they're driving economic growth were we to exit the European Union. And similarly, and I'm sure the Minister will agree on this point as well, whether all his colleagues will or not is another question, we mustn't undermine the flow of talent coming into our country by the sort of measures we've seen affecting students or by new restrictions on Tier 2 visas. My second point is that we should recognise and maintain our strengths. We should build on what we have that's positive and do more of it. The UK catapult centres, where universities and industry work together, are an important start. At the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in the Sheffield City region, over 100 companies, as I said earlier, partner university research in a way which wins jobs and orders for the UK. Some of these are the giants like Rolls-Royce, some are the high-tech supply companies who support them. And it's not only the companies who benefit. This research demands skills, and these centres now have over 600 young people training as advanced apprentices, fully funded by companies, as was recognised by the Times Higher in the Widening Participation Initiative of the Year. They're working in a research environment and have the opportunity to progress to degrees and even to MBAs and PhDs, all within a research setting. So how was the AMRC in Sheffield built? It was built by universities and industries working together through European funding and through regional funding under the old RDAs. But we should invest in other areas too, with a sense of national purpose. We know that our ageing society will face huge human and social costs as incurable neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's become even more common. Social, technical and medical innovation are urgently needed to deal with this as the NHS struggles to deliver with more limited resources. Places like the Sheffield Institute for Translational Neuroscience will make that possible. And we know that we need to decarbonise our energy supply, but that the existing low-carbon alternatives are still too expensive, often too difficult. Research and innovation will change that. My third point is we need to build on capacity. The Chancellor has talked about our economy needing an extra gear. That extra gear is research and innovation. We need more capacity in our industry, but it won't happen if we don't support the research strengths of our universities. Every industry, every city, every region needs transformational research to drive growth and the wealth that we all need. In the last Parliament, I served on the Business Innovation Skills Select Committee, and we highlighted that challenge in our report on business-university collaboration, in which we recommended, and this is a cross-party committee dominated by members from government benches, we recommended unanimously for the government to aim for 3% of GDP to be spent on research and development by 2020. So perhaps, above all of the comments I've made, I'd welcome the Minister's response on that challenge that we made as a select committee, because we are at a crossroads. The erosion of the UK's capacity to technologically innovate was not inevitable. It was the unintended consequence of a series of choices made over decades. But we can reverse it. And if we don't, we will be condemned to continue on our current trajectory of low growth, poor trade performance, and ultimately lose the power over our own economic destiny. So I would urge the government to recognise the vital contribution of research and innovation to the UK, to ensure that we can really thrive in a globally competitive environment.
I'm grateful to the member. The question is that the House has considered science and research in the UK and regional economies. Before I call members, and there's a number wishing to speak, I will be calling the front bench to do the wind-up, including the SNP spokesperson, at 10:30, and allowing a couple of minutes for Mr Blomfield to wind up at the end. Mr Byrne had indicated to me that he would be late, and I will be allowing him to respond from the front bench. So I now call Mr Mark Field.
Thank you, Mr Owen. I congratulate the honourable gentleman for Sheffield Central. We've worked together on a number of issues to do with universities and immigration. I suspect when he was making some slightly disparaging comments about some of the views on immigration on this side of the House, he wasn't including me in that number. He knows that we've worked together, particularly in relation to the importance of being an outward-looking nation and attracting the brightest and best. That applies not just to our universities, but actually in many of the areas that are so important to our research in the corporate world. I think, in fairness, creditably and correctly, this government does aspire to make the UK the best place in the world to run an innovative business or service. But instinctively, we know that to achieve that will require a strong financial sector, a plentiful supply of those very highly skilled people from across the globe, ideally, of course, those also in significant numbers to be trained from within the indigenous population, but also progress when it comes to creating intellectual property and a thriving science and research community. All of those ingredients are today to be found, certainly in London, part of the country that I represent in this House, where, of course, the capital's universities have put themselves at the heart of innovation and the drive to bring finance and business together to commercialise that innovation. My own constituency here is home, of course, to three of the capitals and indeed of the world's top universities in Imperial College, King's College London and the London School of Economics. Their relentless rise in the university league tables coincides with our city's seemingly unstoppable growth as a premier destination for that global talent, capital and ideas. Just as, of course, the metropolis has married financiers with startups to create a booming tech sector, our universities have, of course, and remain adept at collaborating with the city's businesses, its philanthropic, government and research communities. And this is beginning to reap some very huge dividends. I'm not suggesting we should be in any way complacent about this, and took on board much of the concern, the statistical concern that was brought up by the Honourable Gentleman for Sheffield Central. I think he makes some valid points. It was the member for Blakely and Broughton who pointed out that there is this golden triangle, sadly some way south of the Pennines, but it's that London-Oxford Cambridge Golden Triangle does have more science and tech workers and faster industry growth even than California as a whole. To give you some examples, Mr Owen, in 2007, Imperial College integrated its medical facilities with St Mary's and Hammersmith hospitals. Today, Imperial College Healthcare, only 8 years on, is a globally respected centre for medical research, with patients benefiting from cutting-edge care and academics able to trial the really state-of-the-art new treatments on London's uniquely diverse population. Similarly, Imperial is collaborating with Aviva Investors on a new White City campus, Imperial West, to support science startups and also to ensure that the UK benefits commercially from those breakthroughs made in the university labs. The traditional, one of the oldest traditional problems that goes back actually to Victorian times, the idea that we are able to get cutting-edge research but not able to glean the real benefits commercially once that the research makes its way into general products. That's something we clearly have to get right. I'm not suggesting there are easy solutions, and as I say, it's a problem that really goes back 120, 130 years. Maybe the Minister has got some bright ideas on this, but I don't think I would necessarily blame him if he also felt that it's something that is very much work in progress for our improvement. So the plan really for Imperial is to ensure that the university will soon be virtually independent of public funding. Already one of the spin-outs based on the campus, DNA Electronics, is transforming academic discoveries into serious commercial propositions, offering affordable chip devices that can test for genetic diseases and to drug intolerances within minutes. Amidst that healthy rivalry between London's top institutions, there's also significant partnership, and that's something that, again, we should very much applaud and relish. Imperial, King's and University College London, for example, have joined forces with government and others to build the groundbreaking Francis Crick Institute for biomedical research in the King's Cross area. Once again, this will complement the arrival of Central St Martin's in nearby Granary Square, of course.
Thank you, Mark. When he refers to the friendly rivalry with, in relation to the universities within his own constituency, would he agree with me that we need to encourage that friendly rivalry right across the United Kingdom, so that organisations like Innovate UK and others will develop and make progress right across the entire nation, and that it's in the interests of us all to see the kind of progress that he sees in London replicated across the entire nation?
No, I very much agree with that, and I know that perhaps understandably there was a certain amount of cynicism when the Chancellor of the Exchequer some 2 years ago talked about the Northern Powerhouse. Obviously he represents a seat, albeit in leafy Cheshire, but nonetheless I think it is very important, and my own personal view, it's a battle that I have with a number of my colleagues in London on both sides of the divide on this issue. I personally think we should be investing money in HS3 well before we even think about putting it into HS2. We need, actually, there's a strong case to build high-speed rail, indeed high-speed transport connections between our regional centres. And one of the difficulties we have, I mean, we could have a whole debate about this broader issue. Actually, the dominance of London, and I understand why there is a lot of hostility towards that dominance, but we have a single global city in this country of 8 million people, and we have a cluster of cities of about 1 million. In an ideal world, we would build another city from scratch, perhaps something about 3 million as its population, that would be a global player to try and somehow counter the dominance of London within the UK. However, and I would say this to the honourable gentleman, a huge amount of the investment that comes into London, if it didn't come to London, it wouldn't come to the UK at all. There's not a zero-sum game between London and the rest of the UK. And more important still, when a huge amount of the construction and contracting work that comes in for London-related projects often goes out to the regions, not just to the Oxfords and Cambridges as well, but actually out to Derbyshire, to Nottinghamshire, to many of our I don't mean to disparage any second-tier cities that we have in this country, where huge amounts of work can be done. So, of course.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for being generous with his time. London's my capital city, and he is absolutely right that London has some attractions, both in technology and in transport, that nowhere else in the United Kingdom has. But it also gets a disproportionate amount of scientific funding, not to the universities, and I'm talking about the Golden Triangle, not just London, that could just as easily go into the regions and probably have greater benefit. And I'm thinking of the Diamond Light Source that was taken from the northwest in Daresbury and went to Oxford. And I'm thinking about the Crick Institute, which you mentioned, which could just as easily have been placed in Manchester, Sheffield, or Newcastle.
No, I think the honourable gentleman has made a point. I'm not sure I can necessarily answer it, and maybe he'll be getting a kick given his criticisms from Oxford from directly to his right, I suspect. But I think amidst all the conversation about great strides in technology and science, that London is also an important centre for some of the leading research, leading global research in the social sciences sphere. And here, of course, it's the London School of Economics. It's very much at the forefront. The sheer quality of research undertaken by the LSE is regularly attested by peers to be world-leading. In the recent Research Excellence Framework, that school was ranked as a top institution in the UK for the proportion of 4-star world-leading research. All of this means that the LSE, and with it the nation, has extensive global reach, particularly within the public policy and governance sphere in institutions such as the UN, the World Bank, the OECD, and of course the World Health Organization. In the social sciences, however, it's harder, I think, to commercialise that work. And without mainly public funding, the school could not undertake the high-quality research that underpins its impact and provides the UK with considerable soft power globally. Now, in the aftermath, Mr Owen, of the 2008 financial crash, there was much feverish gossip of the pressing need to rebalance the economy away from an over-reliance upon banking and finance. That task, in a way, has been very successfully undertaken here in the capital city, with the creative tech, research and education sectors drawn together in what I regard as a virtuous circle that in some cases has helped spur physical regeneration. And as I've touched on King's Cross, that's a classic area where that's happening. I think the Olympic site will be another area going forward. But this, I think, has only served, I think, to entrench the capital's dominance that I touched on earlier on in the wider UK economy, rather than address the other more elusive rebalancing act which is, I think, boosting the regions and other nations of the UK. And as a London MP, I recognise the importance of that, not least because I think that hostility towards London is getting ever more of a klaxon call, and I think very worrying for the rest of the UK. So how the rest of the UK's universities, innovators and startups compete with the London and Oxbridge research powerhouse, I think is the very real challenge, and I look forward to listening from other colleagues during the course of this debate. A fifth of government research funding is now claimed by our top 3 universities, that Golden Triangle, and it's a capital city that has over 100,000 square metres of new research facilities in the pipeline. Furthermore, the southeast, east of England and London account, of course, for some 52% of R&D performed in the UK as a whole. Mr Owen, thank you for the indulgence of letting me speak at some length, but I think if the Chancellor's Northern Powerhouse and the broader devolution agenda is to work, he should, I think, examine how London's universities have not just integrated academic excellence into the heart of this global city, but provided a compelling educational offering to the world through the relentless building of links with the worlds of industry, commerce, government and finance.
I just remind members I'll be calling the front bench at 10:30, and I have 6 members indicating that they want to speak. William Greenman.
Thank you, Mr Owen. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. Can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central, on securing today's debate and for setting out so eloquently the vital role that science plays both in his city, across the north of England, and for the wider UK economy. He demonstrated clearly the need for policies that support an environment in which research can flourish. And his concerns are clearly shared by colleagues across the UK, and I can assure the House in Nottingham and the wider East Midlands, not just by those working in our universities, but by businesses, large and small, our local enterprise partnership, D2N2, who all recognise the key role that science and life sciences in particular have to play in our region's future success. Our local authorities too are keen to promote regeneration and the creation of good jobs, and they've identified the potential for science and technology to be leading sectors driving growth in our economy. But local and regional success requires national support, and the UK cannot meet the economic, health, security and environmental challenges facing our society without a government that champions science and research. My honourable friend has already set out the way in which government investment in science and research creates a virtuous circle, leveraging investment from industry, raising productivity and creating more high-value jobs. It's quite simply the case that if you want to grow the economy and make the UK globally competitive, investing in science and research is an effective way to use public money. In fact, a failure to commit to future investment won't just break this beneficial cycle, it will undermine the UK's competitive advantage and damage our economic outlook. Any government that's serious about long-term economic planning wouldn't be cutting the science budget. Yet, unfortunately, over the last 5 years, that's exactly what has happened. As my honourable friend said, the Science is Vital campaign have highlighted, freezing the science budget disbursed annually to universities and research institutes in cash terms means that its real value has fallen by around 15% since 2010. And that decline puts the UK firmly at the bottom of the G8 group of countries in terms of government support for science. In the UK, university research makes up a higher proportion of total R&D compared to our comparators. But far from crowding out other investment, this government support attracts in outside funding, and UK universities, as my honourable friend said, have grown their own investment into R&D by 40% in the last decade. We have that very efficient research base producing a much higher proportion of highly cited publications than might be expected, so we do punch above our weight. But the Business Department's own analysis paper of 2013 both recognised that the UK's long-term pattern of underinvestment in public and private research and development was holding the UK economy back, and concluded that a level of R&D spend consistent with securing future economic success is likely to be closer to the 2.9% average of our comparators. Public sector expenditure may need to rise more sharply in the short to medium term, partly to develop the necessary talent and partly to catalyse private sector investment. And in December last year, the Biz Select Committee reached a very similar conclusion, recommending that the government aim for 3% of GDP to be spent on R&D by 2020. So my first question to the Minister is, how will you ensure that the UK doesn't fall further behind, miss out on new opportunities and risk the strengths that we have? But this isn't just about the UK's place in a global race. It's also a local issue, and one that matters very directly to my own constituency. Nottingham's strength, particularly in life sciences, is long-standing and well recognised. We have two world-class universities in the University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent University, and one of the largest teaching hospitals in Europe. We're proud that BioCity, the largest bioincubator in the UK, was established here in 2002 as a unique collaboration between our universities and the East Midlands Development Agency, and it now sustains over 650 employees working for around 70 companies on its main site, undertaking that innovation, taking science and turning it into economic propositions. These more recent developments build on our heritage. Nottingham's been home to Boots for more than 150 years, and its Lenton headquarters, manufacturing and logistics centres make it one of the largest private sector employers in the city. The development of the Nottingham Enterprise Zone, which includes the Boots site, provides huge opportunities for future growth. And MediCity, a collaboration between Boots and BioCity, designed to support innovators in consumer healthcare, medical technology, diagnostics and beauty products, is already home to 40 start-up companies. And just last week, the D2N2 LEP approved a £6.5 million grant of local growth fund towards a new state-of-the-art life sciences complex being built by the City Council to expand BioCity and create hundreds of new jobs in the city. Now, I welcome this and other government-backed investment in capital infrastructure. But whilst high-profile announcements sound good and the strategic commitment to new facilities and equipment over the period 2016 to 2021 is welcome, without sufficient resource funding, such new facilities won't meet their potential. Nottingham has all the building blocks in place, but adequate government support for research remains critical. And as already been said, this isn't a question just of the total value of research support, but also its regional distribution, a point my honourable friend for Blackley and Broughton has made very forcefully already in this debate. Glenn Crocker, the CEO of BioCity, has also highlighted how London and the south and east of England continue to receive a disproportionate share of total investment, both public and private. So if the government is serious about economic rebalancing, and I would suggest it isn't just about a northern powerhouse, it's also about the Midlands as well, then that situation needs to change. So I hope that when he responds, he'll set out how he does intend to address this distortion, and ensure that Nottingham, which certainly has the people, the facilities and the strong and viable business propositions, also gets the financial support that it requires to build that thriving technology sector we aspire to. Now, as an MP without a background in science, I've been fortunate to participate in the Royal Society's pairing scheme, and the opportunity to build links with real practitioners has been very valuable. I approached my former pairs for some of their views before today's debate, and one of the things that they expressed was that concern about resource funding. As physics professor Philip Moriarty succinctly put it, there's no point in bright, shiny new pieces of kit if there aren't the researchers there for use it. There's a lot more I would like to say, Mr Owen, about the MRC Institute here in Research at University of Nottingham, which I visited last week, and the huge contributions that they're able to meet, and the way in which they operate in a multidisciplinary environment, which I think is one of the most important aspects of our universities and can be a catalyst for new thinking. People will remember the story that appeared in the press about the way an ancient in fact, a 10th century potion to treating eye infections was used, was tested out by, which was discovered by an Anglo-Saxon expert from our School of English, was tested out by biomedics and found to actually be successful tackling MRSA, which has eluded scientists for some time. So I think that ability to work cross-discipline is very important. And it shouldn't be forgotten the importance of blue skies research. Peter Mansfield, very famous in Nottingham for building the first MRI scanner, but he actually started work with a physics experiment on solid-liquid interactions. He didn't anticipate the impact that his work would have, and that's often the case, that impact is difficult to predict or quantify, and Blue Skies research mustn't be lost in the drive for value for money. Mr Owen, I'm conscious of needing to finish my remarks, so I just want to say three things to the Minister. First of all, can he make a commitment or tell us what commitment he makes to knowledge transfer partnerships, because that's one of the most important long-running government growth and innovation initiatives celebrating 40 years this year, and certainly valued in my city. Can he say something about, as my honourable friend has already said, about the way that immigration rules, and particularly around post-study work visas, whether he's willing to have that discussion with the Home Office. And at a time when we're particularly conscious of the role in women in science and research, and that's been in the spotlight in the press, and of course yesterday was National Women in Engineering Day, can he say what the government intends to do to ensure that we celebrate the talents of everyone who would like to get involved in science research, and that persistent gender imbalance that we see? And finally, can I extend an invitation to him, if he's in Nottingham, to visit both of the universities in my constituency, or if he and his colleagues find themselves in Ningbo in China or Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, to visit the extraordinary University of Nottingham campuses in those cities, where over 11,000 students are studying for British degrees and carrying out cutting-edge research, bringing together the bridge between UK and Asia. I thank him for listening, and I look forward to hearing his comments.
So Jim Shannon. Just before the member does continue, I'm not putting the time scale on it, but we will be calling them, as indicated, at 10:30. So do the maths. There's four speakers, including Mr. Shannon.
Thanks, Mr. Owen. I certainly will keep within those time limits. Can I first of all just thank the honourable gentleman for Sheffield Central for bringing this topic to the House for consideration. The fact that there's so many colleagues here from Northern Ireland, and my honourable friend for East London has left, but at one stage we were the second largest party in this room today, which gives an indication of the importance of this subject matter to us in Northern Ireland and where we are. I'm going to speak very specifically on the issue of research on health technologies and disease prevention and cure. The UK is renowned for its research capabilities, and I'm very, very aware of that. The importance of science and research has been recognised by successive governments, and they're seeking to protect the science budget from significant cuts. I think that speaks volumes in itself. But at the same time, many of those in the science and research community have said that our spending is mediocre by international standards. So that's a fact of life. So how do we work better with private partnership to make that happen? The impact of science and research is tangible across the regional economies. In Northern Ireland, we are lucky enough to be home to fantastic research universities, allowing these institutions to be trailblazers for research across the scientific board. Queen's University in Belfast is one of those pioneers in breakthroughs in medical treatments and disease. They're working on improving patient care and treating bowel cancer, as one example, using the latest state-of-the-art techniques to define the genetic makeup of bowel cancer cells will no doubt bring significant advancements in diagnosis rates and also in treatment. Almac company in Portadown and Upper my friends constituency of Upper Ban is one of those. Again, the projects to develop better tests for diagnosing, treating prostate, ovarian and breast cancer. Yesterday, the figures for ovarian cancer were notified. In Northern Ireland, we have the worst recovery rate and life expectancy rate in the whole of the United Kingdom. 70% of those who get ovarian cancer die within 5 years. The advances in ovarian cancer are needed, and those are happening at Queen's University. Again, we have Terumo Blood Technologies. They have made great contributions domestically and globally in the detecting and treating disease in Larne. 280 people are employed there. And my own constituency, TG Egan's, manufacture high-quality medical supplies, have significant contributions to the science, health and research community. In 2005, they launched their own research and development department. And now their success story has went beyond my constituency, beyond Comber. And they employ 280 employees in Comber, Cardiff, and the honourable lady who spoke before me in her constituency of Nottingham as well. So They are making real-life contributions in the long-term trajectory to people's lives, well-being and health. I'd like to make it very quickly, and I'm very conscious of time, Mr. Owen. Those who, how we get those of the 11 to post-16 into school and get them to focus upon the careers advice. And perhaps the Minister can give us some indication what discussions he has had with his Minister responsible for that, to ensure that when it comes to careers advice, we're encouraging our young people to look towards this here as a way of going forward. I believe that we need to focus upon the science skills that are needed to improve the core in the modern British and global economy. In conclusion, Mr. Owen, I just want to say this, that when it comes to the role of science and research, it plays a very significant part in wealth and job creation. We need to help ensure our young people are prepared to exploit these opportunities in the market and have well-paid, skilled jobs at the end of their education. Premeditating these skills will also require accounting for secondary scientists, just as the Science Council urges us to do, rather than only consider what we conventionally see as so-called science sectors. Again, look forward to other contributions and look forward to the Minister's response as well. Thank you.
Member, I call Mr Andrew Smith, followed by Dr Whitehead, and if we time, Mr Wilson.
Mr Owen, again, I congratulate my honourable friend, and this debate gives me the opportunity to praise the stellar success of science in Oxford and the enormous benefits it brings to our city, our region and the country. The gross value added of the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership is the highest in the country outside London. Oxford University and Oxford Brookes University are crucial to its success, providing many of the projects for the Local Growth Fund, as well as driving Oxfordshire's strategic economic plan, which is entirely innovation-based. But the best thing about science research and the economy in Oxford, though, is the sheer excitement and ambition of so much of the work being done. Just a couple of examples. There is a real chance that pulling together big data, advances in molecular biology, and the Precision Cancer Medicine Institute, with the collaboration now of some 200 different interdisciplinary teams across Oxford University, all feeding in, there's a real chance that we'll be in the lead globally in work properly to personalise cancer treatment and increase the rate of cures, not just treating cancer, Mr Owen, curing it. Secondly, at Oxford Brookes, higher education innovation funding set up the Sustainable Vehicle Engineering Centre. This has been used by BMW and all the major automotive companies in the development of electric vehicles. The university has just launched an innovative new undergraduate degree in business and automotive management in partnership with BMW. University innovation in the lead in a crucial national industry. The quality and potential of innovation and breakthrough is replicated right across the universities, the centres and science parks we're fortunate to have in Oxfordshire, and I'm privileged to see both locally and here in Parliament when we have the annual Set for Britain poster presentations, where there are always so many stunning entrants and prize winners from young Oxford scientists. So research in Oxford is sustaining thousands of jobs and spinning out companies, having been an early pioneer of university spin-outs with Oxford Instruments, set up in 1959, now a global leader. Many others are treading the same path, and more could do so. I just want to underline to the government, again, 3 key points where Oxford's potential is being held back by the state and where the state should be helping us. The first is housing, where shortage of supply is driving the price-earnings ratio and rents to the highest in the country outside London, risking damaging the ability of the science community locally to recruit the brightest and the best, as well as making life hard for all those technicians and others whose teamwork supports the innovators and entrepreneurs. Please allow us to relax the green belt in a measured way to let Oxford and its science grow. The second is a plea, echoing what others have said to the government, to change its rhetoric and practice on immigration. Many young scientists in particular are not on high earnings and face a hand-to-mouth existence climbing up the research ladder. There is a real danger that the earnings threshold on settlement will discourage talented young scientists and their partners from coming here. Yet the forefront of scientific research is a global labour market, and the government needs to remember that. There's very good evidence from the All-Party Group on Migration, who did a report earlier this year on the UK post-study work opportunities for international students, that the abolition of the old post-study work visa has damaged students from many countries, notably India, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, from accessing higher education in the UK. And when they don't come here to do science courses, domestic students lose out where those courses get closed down. So the government needs to change its stance on that. And the third, as others have said, is we need to get the government to commit to an increase in research funding as a proportion of GDP. The last government did actually ring-fence research funding, recognising it as a powerful catalyst for economic competitiveness and recovery. Compared with our global competitors, the UK underinvests in R&D, and we have to remember that a much higher proportion is undertaken in universities than in competing countries. So I ask the government to commit to increase research funding in general, and in particular in those universities like ours in Oxford, which have shown they can deliver the outcomes the country needs. And I echo the call that was made by my honourable friend for Sheffield Central to the Chancellor to seize the opportunity of the forthcoming budget to commit to increase research funding and thereby stimulate economic growth.
Dr. Alan Whitefield.
I will attempt, Mr. Owen, I'll attempt to speak even faster. In the Marx Brothers film Go West, the brothers realise that the train that they are embarked on simply hasn't got enough fuel on board, and they spend quite a long time running through the train, smashing up the carriages in order to get the wood, in order to put it in the engine, in order to get the train to the station. Train gets to the station, unfortunately it's not a train anymore. And I think that's where we are in terms of R&D development and particularly higher education research development in this country. We are smashing up our own resource in order to keep the show on the road, and it's a very good show. We do indeed have, for example, 12% of global citations for 1% of world population. We are home to 29 of the world's top 200 universities. We're first in the G8 for scientific papers. It's a very good story to tell, but how long will it continue if we continue to invest less than 0.5% of GDP in public R&D, as we have already heard this morning? What is that future? Will the train not only get into the station, but actually be able to recognisably get out of the station for future journeys in a clear form, especially since, as we have also heard this morning, other countries are really stepping up their effort. China aiming to have 2.5% of public R&D by 2020, Sweden substantially developing its R&D as a percentage of GDP, South Korea 2.3 trillion in R&D in 2012. A series of countries actually going in precisely the opposite direction that we are. And this is just not a debate for the future in very abstract terms. Taking my own university in Southampton, in the city, one of two universities that Southampton has. Southampton University not only is indeed among those top universities in the country, but actually makes, as was recently enumerated, an enormous contribution to the gross value added, not just nationally, 2 billion gross value added, 26,000 jobs, but regionally and locally. In terms of its research, it has a very clear outcome, for example, in terms of the fibre optic research that Southampton did over a period of years, has essentially spawned an entire photonics industry in the UK worth £10 billion, 70,000 employees, and a very substantial local photonics cluster in Southampton. In terms of the Set Squared initiative in Southampton, bringing together a number of universities to incubate businesses and spin-offs from the research done at universities. That is now the prime business incubator, regarded as prime business incubator from the university sector in Europe. spin-offs in the science park recently of 86 companies, 29 startups, a very real impact on the basis of what the university is obtaining in its research and development funding back into the local community, into the region and nationally. And if that tap of that funding is turned off in the future, I'm not saying that there haven't been substantial capital innovations recently. The 200 million Centre for Advanced Materials Research that we've talked about, that is a very substantial capital improvement. It is the business of just keeping the whole thing going that we are falling down on in this country.
Would the Honourable Member give way?
Give way?
Much appreciate the Honourable Member giving way. On these threats, would he agree with me that the further threat is any threat to our position with the European Union? In my university, University of Cambridge, 12% of the research budget comes from the European Union, but even more importantly, it's the collaborative networks with other EU countries that people tell me are so vital. Is that a further threat, do you think?
It is indeed a substantial further threat, and if we shut ourselves away from Europe, then we will throw that advantage that we have in this country as far as our membership of the EU is away in terms of our own future R&D as well. The Honourable Member is absolutely right. It's something that we don't perhaps notice happening. It's easy to miss it, and there are not catastrophic consequences as a result of disinvesting in terms of R&D as far as universities and research centres are concerned. But it is potentially catastrophic for the future competitiveness of this country and the future of those sort of arrangements that I've set out happen as far as Southampton is concerned in its area, in its region and in the country as a whole. And I urge the Minister to take careful note of this debate this morning to ensure that that investment, that it should be there for the future, is put in place and that commitments are made to make sure that that carries on coming in to support our universities and our research activities, which are so valuable and such a source of potential future fuel for this country's ambitions across the world.
Okay, Sammy Wilson.
Can I thank the members who did cut their speeches short, because I know they probably, like myself, had a lot to say. I don't want to go through all of the benefits of research and development because that's already been well outlined in previous speeches. All I would like to say is that the two universities in Northern Ireland, Queen's and the University of Ulster, do have an excellent record in research, and indeed Queen's is ranked 8th in research intensity across the United Kingdom. And that research not only benefits the Northern Ireland economy, but indeed benefits almost every individual in the country. And I just look at examples here in London. Cleaner buses, quieter buses, buses which are more efficient as a result of work which started in the 1990s at Queen's University, was then transferred to Wrightbus in Ballymena, and now results in new buses running around the streets here in London, and of course has helped Wrightbus become one of the leading technology and engineering companies in Northern Ireland. Or when it comes to food safety, the Queen's University took the lead there, and indeed Professor Elliott from Queen's University was asked to set up the task force to deal with food safety after the horse meat scandal. And indeed much of the research now which was done at Queen's enables laboratories around the world to detect multiple contaminants within food. And I could talk about all of that quite extensively. But there are some challenges that need to be faced. And the first one is this, and it's been mentioned already, but I think that the government needs to give a commitment. The amount of money which is available for research and development, and the commitment which is required. And I recognise that the last government did ring-fence research and development spending, but the commitment to spend 3% of GDP, even in times of austerity, towards research and development. It helps productivity, it helps growth, and I believe that it has got long-term consequences, though sometimes the lead-in, as Queen's research has shown, sometimes the lead-in period is quite long. The second thing is this, that there has been, and I mean, it's been identified, that whilst a lot of research does go on, the link between research and universities, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises, has been very weak. Some of the larger companies can devote the resources and see the value. Some of the smaller companies don't. And whether that's through tax incentives, whether it's through the universities being more proactive and being encouraged to be more proactive, that is a big challenge because, of course, the places where productivity needs to be increased greatest and the product range needs to be increased more is among small and medium-sized enterprises. The third challenge is the whole issue of EU funding. There are huge opportunities there which are not capitalised on. And what can the government do there? And the last issue is the issue of skills shortages. Universities are already identifying that skills shortages, especially teaching of STEM subjects and languages, are beginning to hit them. And that means that there needs to be a start from primary school through secondary school, teacher training, and encouraging universities as well to get a cohort of those skills. Those are some of the challenges which I see. The last one, as we mentioned, is immigration. I know that in the University of Ulster, much of the research is undertaken by students from overseas. And in fact, some of the schools would not be viable if you didn't have that influx of overseas students. And I think that when the government's looking at immigration policy, that issue as well needs to be looked at.
I'm grateful to the honourable member. Can I invite Mr Roger Mullin on behalf of the SNP to wind up and welcome him to Parliament?
It's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Owen, and a particular pleasure to respond to this debate raised by the member for Sheffield Central, who I've heard so much about in relation to his inspiring leadership of the higher education sector. I must start by making a declaration of interest. I'm an honorary professor at the University of Stirling still. I have in recent times undertaken a number of ethical reviews of research proposals into matters such as tobacco research. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, but I think is a great strength of UK universities, is their approach to ethical research. Something that I think universities throughout the UK can be tremendously proud of, and is becoming increasingly a selling point of the strength of ambition of our universities to conduct high-quality, leading research, but in an ethical manner. I'm also in a few days' time going to be giving some advice at the request of Dundee and St Andrews University, of which I'm paid the princely sum of nothing, which is, I think, a fair reflection of the quality of my comments to come. In another context, it's not exactly a declaration of interest, but this is something, if you'll forgive me, I wanted to say at some stage in my parliamentary career. This is a very appropriate time for me to speak. My late brother, Jim, who died not all that long ago, graduated from Glasgow University before emigrating to Canada. He became a leading scientist, and after a number of years, he became chairman of the OECD Science and Technology Committee, and I hope he would be pleased that I'm speaking therefore in this debate. Scotland has a remarkable tradition in higher education, in research over the years. And even today, 77% of all research by Scottish universities submitted to the Research Excellence Framework is classified as world-leading or internationally excellent, ahead of the UK average. 86% of Scottish research was judged to be outstanding or having very considerable impact compared to the UK average of 83.9%. And I know impact is something that the member for East Antrim talked about so brilliantly in his 3 minutes and 57 seconds. The Scottish universities also excel and have a great tradition in science. Many of the members here have given many examples from their own constituency. Let me give just one example from, not my constituency, but from Glasgow University, which also ties into the importance of looking at these matters, not merely in the context of a constituency, or of Scotland, or of the UK, but internationally as well. In Glasgow, South Glasgow University Hospital, as well as catering for over 1,000 patients, is the hospital has a campus of Glasgow University and its world-leading stratified medicine Scotland Innovation Centre, state-of-the-art clinical research facility for clinical trials, and it will be the future site of its European leading imaging centre of excellence. And a number of members have pointed out the importance of the European connection to our universities. Fundamentally important. I would say it goes beyond Europe. Our global connections in the UK, our global connections in Scotland are of fundamental importance and to be treasured. So Scotland's universities, of course, as I know, are very proud of their Scottish roots, but equally they're just as proud of being outward-looking, highly collaborative within the UK, within Europe, and internationally. And what might be described as the best of our universities are in a worldwide sort of ecosystem for research for universities. The interchange is important to everyone. It's important not just to Scottish universities when they engage, but we think we've got something to offer as well when we engage with others. At the UK level, in very practical terms, we want to see the continuation of the dual support system for research funding in the UK. We want to see more UK-wide collaboration, more European-wide collaboration that underpins excellence in research. So when some members talked earlier about the value of some localised competition, say in a small place like London, what I would say is if you look more widely, I'm pretty sure many of the universities in London benefit from the way in which they relate with universities in, for example, California, in South Africa, in Germany, and in many other parts of the world. Same is true for Scotland, same is true for every constituency with a university. I'm slightly surprised in this debate that nobody has so far really given any significant mention to the nurse review of UK research councils that has concluded, or at least the consultation phase closed in April, and Sir Paul Nurse is now considering his evidence. And I'm pleased to say that the Scottish Government has already arranged to have further consultations with Sir Paul Nurse in the coming weeks, as have Universities Scotland. So we hope out of this, what we get is the development of more imaginative approaches to research funding that recognises the connections to, for example, innovation that people have talked in this debate so eloquently about. In terms of the European research partnerships, I think it was the Honourable Member for Sheffield Central that mentioned that, the importance of the Framework 7 programme. To give you an indication of how this European connection is so important to Scottish universities, by the time the Framework 7 programme ended in 2013, Scotland had been awarded €636 million in funding. And the funding that comes from European Research Council to Scotland has meant that Scotland received 11.2%, well above our population share of that funding. So for Scottish universities, it's fundamentally important that we have strong and continuing links with the European Union as well as others globally. So as I come to conclude my remarks, there are a couple of things I would like to ask the Minister, one of which I have not mentioned in my speech thus far, and that is the way in which immigration policy, as pursued by this government, is a barrier to attracting leading research talent from around the world. Some members, honourable members over here have already mentioned that. This is critically important. In Scotland, we are particularly concerned and would call for a return of the post-study work visa to enable people who are here studying, receiving high research-end degrees, able to continue to make a contribution. It seems to us completely and utterly insane that these are the people who this government is discriminating against when they have so much to contribute to this country. We would also ask the government to make sure that in this coming budget The fears of some of our universities of what is about to occur does not occur. And that is the fear that there will be a squeeze on research funding at a time when what we need to do, as many members, and this side of the benches have said, that what we need to see is increased investment in R&D for the benefit of productivity, for the benefit of innovation. Thank you.
Mr. Owen, thank you very much. It's a privilege to serve under your chairmanship, and let me apologise for missing the beginning of this debate. I want to add my congratulations to the Minister. It's good to see him in his place. I'm obviously sad that I'm not sitting in his place, but nonetheless, if there has to be a Conservative Minister, I'm glad that it's him. He is a fully signed-up member of the thinking classes, despite what his father has to say, and I'm sure he will distinguish himself in his office. I too want to add my congratulations to my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central. It's good to see him back with such an increased majority. That is a testament to his extraordinary work in his constituency and in the House over the last Parliament. And it's with characteristic speed that he has brought this debate to the floor of the House too. Now, we have managed to achieve a degree of consensus on science policy over the last 20 years, which I think has done this country well. We need to preserve and enhance that consensus over the course of this Parliament. However, I do say to the Minister that now is the time to begin making some progress on a number of substantial policy issues. And in the debate that we've had this morning, I think a number of those issues have now become clear. As we set about that task, I think it's important that we very much keep our eyes on the prize that is there for the taking with science policy over the next decade or two. Last year was a bumper year for British science. A number of extraordinary achievements, from landing probes on comets to advances in medical science. But as Sir Paul Moore said, and I think it's important that we pay tribute to Sir Paul's leadership of the Royal Society here this morning, as Sir Paul said, that progress last year represented the fruits of years and years of patient chipping away at the coalface. As my honourable friend, the member for Nottingham South, and others said this morning, we are now in some jeopardy of destroying the foundations of the kind of progress that we saw last year unless some important changes in policy are made. Over the next 10 years, we could seize the fruits of a very different kind of world taking shape around us. The fact that the majority of the world's people now live in cities, the fact that the majority will soon be interconnected with the cloud, the Internet of Things will bring new networks to bear. We're actually now able to work together in a completely different way. And of course, there is a new premium on us as a world getting some of those decisions right. The decisions over the next 5 to 10 years will have a critical bearing on whether we succeed in keeping global temperature rises below 2 degrees. And as my honourable friend, the member for Oxford East, as well as my honourable friend, the member for Nottingham South, spelt out, in medical science and beyond, there is the potential for great progress if we make the right decisions over the next few years. We, of course, in this country, have a parochial interest in some of those decisions being taken in a correct way, not least because of the impact of science and innovation policy on our lamentable productivity performance. I am glad the Chancellor has now woken up to the crisis in British productivity growth, which is today worse than it was at the end of the 1970s, when we used to call it British disease. What the rest of the G7 now finishes making on a Thursday night takes us till the end of Friday to get done. We will not raise living standards in our country unless we close that awning 20% global productivity gap with the rest of the G7. Now, I think, I will in a moment, we have now, I think this morning, heard 3 very clear policy priorities that I hope the Minister will attend to. The first, of course, is money. As we heard this morning, Britain is now seeing not a growth in its science budget, we are seeing a very substantial decline. And yet we are at a crossover moment in global science spending. China this year will probably spend more on science than the EU 28 put together. By 2019, China will spend more on science than the United States of America. 4 out of the top 10 biggest tech firms in the world are now Asian. Shanghai's PISA results are well in advance of our PISA results here in the UK. We are now at a crossover point that we perhaps last saw in 1455, when the good jobs in the world will be created in the East and the cheap labour jobs will be created here in the West. And if we are to guard against that challenge, then we have got to make more progress on funding. And I think the Select Committee was absolutely right to say the right target for science spending in this country is 3% of GDP. There is a cross-party consensus around this in Germany. Korea has already exceeded this. It's the norm in parts of Scandinavia. And what we need to see in the budget in a couple of weeks' time is the launch of a consultation by the Chancellor for what will be the measures that will most effectively crowd in private sector money. Now, some of that will be national policy, but other ideas, as we've heard this morning from my honourable friend, the member of Southampton Test, but also my honourable friend from Nottingham South, some of those measures will be ways of actually ensuring that science begins to regenerate our cities and our towns too. So this is not just about crowding in global spending, if you like, into the UK, but it's about making sure that we unlock the regenerative power in science up and down our country. And I hope that one of the ideas that we will put on the table as part of that consultation is a very radical expansion of university enterprise zones, which is a good idea, but which is now currently confined to just 4 towns and cities in the UK. Actually, we should be using university enterprise zones far more radically in the years to come. Second, we need a new consensus on technical education. His colleague, the Minister for Skills, has said that he is interested in agreeing a number of high-level principles that will guide a technical education system for the future. We go through this crisis decade in, decade out in this country. We've got to begin making progress. And I would suggest to the Minister that the right place to start is by putting into the Treasury a serious submission that calls for the Chancellor to save our further education system. We are not going to be able to build a world-class technical education in this system if we kick out its spine, and that, as Alison Wolfe made very clear this morning, is precisely what is coming. We cannot build a world-class technical education system if all over England we are shutting down further education colleges and closing down adult education. And so that, I believe, is a good place to start in this debate about rebooting our technical education system for the 21st century. The third idea that we've heard a lot about this morning are changes that are needed to our immigration system. We should be calling for, in this Parliament, free movement of scientists and free movement of students. That is the only way we're going to be able to make sure that this country is connected to the best brain power wherever it happens to be born. I was the author of the first post-study work visa when I was the immigration minister. It wasn't perfect, but it was an awful lot better than the system that we have today. And if we are to ensure that we are training and educating the best students for the years to come, then we have got to look again at how we put in place a much better post-study work visa for the system, and I'll be very happy to work with the Minister on getting that right. My final point, Mr Owen, I think is just to underline the call made by my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central, for a new consensus for this Parliament. 355 years ago, 2 groups of men, and they were men, from very different sides of the political spectrum, came together at Gresham College on the site where Tower 42 now stands in the honourable member's constituency. On one side of the divide were the Royalists, and on the other side were the parliamentarians. But on that moment, in November 1660, they decided to put aside historic divisions and work together in the interest of science. The Royal Society was born on that afternoon after, I think it was an astronomy lecture delivered by Sir Christopher Wren. That is the kind of consensus that we now need again. And frankly, if the Royalists and the parliamentarians could do it in 1660, then I think the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the SNP and others could perhaps make the same move. I hope the Minister, therefore, will work with us constructively and creatively. I hope he will take the points that he's heard this morning to heart, and I think he would do very well to read again over the days and weeks to come in the run-up to the budget an excellent opening speech by my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central.
Therefore, in calling the Minister, I welcome him to his role and remind him that the member for Sheffield Central has 2 minutes to wind up. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Owen. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and to do so here today on this important subject. And I also congratulate the honourable member, gentleman for Sheffield Central, for prompting discussion on a key aspect of government policy. UK regions are at the heart of this government's economic strategy, and the government is mindful to ensure that investment, as he warned, should not get sucked into hyper-concentrated areas such as the Golden Triangle at the expense of the excellence that can be found in many other parts of the country. And this is a matter which I'm paying close attention to in the first few weeks in my role. We believe that science and research has a central role in these regions, and the government wants the national economic recovery that's been underway for a number of years to continue to benefit all parts of our country. Investment in the research base in the regions is an absolutely key part to that. And the extra gear our economy needs is to be found, in my view, in the R&D capabilities, in the universities, in our regions, as well as in the Golden Triangle, which members have mentioned. UK science is an international success story and a major driver of growth and attractor of inward investment, as members have mentioned. It's not always recognised that it can make a huge contribution to local and regional economies and to rebalancing the economy, a goal to which the government is strongly committed. I want to, by way of illustration, take you on a very quick regional tour of the investments that we have been making as a government in recent months, starting from Land's End all the way up to John O'Groats, and to point out that many of these investments will contribute to our goal of rebalancing the economy. In the southwest, synthetic biology has been assisted with our investment in a £14 million investment in Bristol, in a centre for synthetic biology. I'm going to detour via London, which members have already mentioned, with its well-known strengths and new investments in institutions such as the Crick and the Alan Turing Institute, to go to just north of London, where we've recently invested £12 million in a centre for agricultural informatics and sustainability metrics near Harpenden. That will start work this summer in modelling more efficient food systems. Further east in the UK, we've just invested £44 million in Babraham and £26 million in Norwich in research into agri-tech. Moving into the West Midlands, not very far from the Right Honourable Member's constituency in Birmingham Hodge Hill, we have an example of what will help our ambition to make the Midlands an engine of growth. As part of the government's £270 million investment in new quantum technologies, Birmingham University has just secured £35 million towards developing an internationally leading centre of excellence and quantum technology hub. This is in addition to the plans for a new National College for High-Speed Rail, which the Right Honourable Member described as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform our local economy. The manifesto, which we published before the general election, had a strong commitment to building the Northern Powerhouse. This is becoming a reality, and investments we are making in things such as the Hartree Centre, centres such as the Hartree Centre, investments in the Square Kilometre Array, the largest scientific experiment in the world, will support that objective. And I could also add to the list the investments we are making in graphene in various ways in the National Graphene Institute and the Graphene Engineering Innovation Centre. And the Honourable Member for Sheffield Central will be impatient for me to cross the Pennines, and he will know that in the Sheffield City region, £10 million has just been invested in a new facility for aerospace and other sectors at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. And in York, we have also invested £27 million in a quantum communications hub as part of our national programme. Heading further north to Scotland, we continue to support Scotland's fine scientific tradition. In just last year, the Chancellor announced a £16 million contribution to a new stratified medicine imaging centre of excellence in Glasgow, which will unite world-leading clinical academic expertise in stroke, cardiovascular disease and brain imaging to aid our understanding and treatment of a range of human diseases. There are other examples in Scotland that I could mention, including Edinburgh University's National Computing Centre, which has benefited from funding for the UK top supercomputer, Archer, being used now by 1,000 academic and industrial users. I would like, though, to turn to some of the issues that members and the Right Honourable Member opposite have raised in the debate so far. The Right Honourable Member for HoC, I want to thank him very much for his generous welcome. It's a pleasure to be in this relationship to him that I am. I've always enjoyed talking with him and hope we can have a productive and cordial relationship in the months ahead. There is a strong cross-party agreement on the role that investment in science and research can play in solving our productivity challenge as a country. And he knows that this government is truly committed to that. The manifesto is evidence of it. Investment in science and research goes through it like the words in a stick of rock. And it is a personal passion of the Chancellor, George Osborne. So science and research is absolutely front and centre of our solution to our productivity puzzle. And science and investment research in our regions is going to be one of the key ways in which we solve the productivity gap, or plug the productivity gap, which is holding us back as a country. The Right Honourable Member mentioned the 3% target issue, and I want to address that directly. It has been an ongoing question in public policy debate for some time. Previous governments, he will know, have attempted to introduce R&D related targets, and they've been unsuccessful in this respect. A target isolated on its own does not in and of itself lead to behavioural change and needs to be complemented by additional policy measures. It's not clear that 3% is an optimal target, and there's no evidence that it would lead to an optimal level of investment for the UK. I would, though, obviously agree that there is evidence that the UK does underinvest compared to other major research economies, and there would be economic benefits from increased investment. In achieving a 3% of GDP spent on R&D is an ambition set out at the EU level. It's not a target for the UK, and the investments that we do make as a country are recognised as being particularly fruitful, and we are recognised as being an excellent place in which to innovate and in which to return very, very high returns on scientific R&D investment.
Would the Minister give way?
Certainly.
Without preempting the ongoing battles he'll be having, no doubt, with the Home Office, I think the immigration question is something that is very strong at our heart. I think he will appreciate very fully that to get the brightest and best across the world, they will go back to their countries as ambassadors for this country for the rest of their lives, often building up businesses and getting those links. We will lose that at our peril. It'll go to Canada, to the USA, to Australia. But also the point that is made that there are a number of leading courses, postgraduate courses, that simply will close down if we do not get significant numbers of overseas students there, to the detriment of our own indigenous population.
Okay. No, of course, this is an important area, and indeed my first speech as Minister in this role was on this very subject at the Going Global conference a few weeks ago. And I was very clear about the positive contribution that international students make. Our post-study options aim to attract the brightest and best. We welcome any student who can secure a graduate-level job with a graduate salary. And we need to clear up misconceptions that have arisen in a number of important countries on our openness and on our warm welcome that we offer to international students, in particular in India. But I note the points he's made, and they are important ones. Can I quickly turn to one or two other points that members have made? The Honourable Member for Nottinghamshire has kindly invited me to go to the various universities in Nottingham, and I look forward to doing so. I note her points about women in engineering, and I had great pleasure yesterday to be at the Parliamentary Links Day and was delighted to see a packed room and so much consensus behind the need for greater diversity. In support of government investment in Nottingham, I would point to the recent investment in Synthetic Biology Research Centre. And I'm sorry I didn't have time to come to other members' contributions.
Waits for no man, not even the Minister. Mr. Paul Blomfield.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I think that the number of members and the quality of the debate that we've had this morning reflects the importance that this House places on the issue and on the need for the government to get it right. My honourable friend, Member for Oxford East, made a powerful case about the impact of research in Oxford, and I think it's quite important because Oxford is often seen as one of the classic ivory towers, but the point that he made demonstrated the way in which that research is working with business to develop economic growth, that Oxford is utterly engaged with the local economy in driving that economy, just as other universities are around the country. And I'd say to the Honourable Member for the Cities of London and Westminster, and I certainly have appreciated working with him over the years of the last Parliament on the issue of migration, and recognise that he is not alone on his benches on this issue. Indeed, the Minister, I think 3 or 4 years ago, wrote a powerful piece in the Financial Times explaining where the government was getting its policy wrong on international students, and I hope he'll continue to make that case within government. The members for Strangford and East Antrim, and indeed Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath, made the case about the importance of research, underlined that case about the importance of research across the regions and nations of the UK.
Order.